Goodrich. You've been watching a special report on the U.S. stock market soaring as President Trump announces a 90-day pause on tariffs for all trading partners except China. A historic close for the Dow today. So let's take a look at our interactive stock market. Look at this. The heat map brought to you by FinViz. It shows a visual representation, red indicating just those two spots there. The stock is down. Green means it's up. Haven't seen this in a while. And the size of the box represents the market cap. Huge gains for investors today as Wall Street gets a little relief on tariffs. So here's the headline. Trump slapped a whopping 125% tariff on China while pausing higher tariffs on all other U.S. trading partners. Every country except China now only faces a 10% reciprocal tariff. CBS News business analyst Jill Schlesinger joining us now. Hello, Jill. Let's talk about what's happening in the markets and what happened today.
Well, it's a relief rally, and certainly the idea that the pause was there and that there are negotiations in place, certainly relief for investors. That said, this is some way to conduct policy. I mean, if you're a business owner or you're an individual and you want to think about what you're going to do for the next 3 to 5 years, you don't know what to do for the next 3 to 5 days. So I still think this leaves us with a lot of questions that are unanswered. Obviously, the president blinked because the markets were rolling over, and specifically not just the stock market, but the bond market started to look very, very unstable, and that became a focus. So I think that it is good to have a pause. It would have been nice to never have gone on this trip, thank you very much, because as investors, we know having a 12% drop in 3 or 4 sessions, we're back up 7%, but we're not all the way back where we were. Remember, these tariffs are still in place, and we have a full-on trade war with China.
Yeah, let's talk about China. Help us understand why China is Trump's biggest target.
I think this has been a real bug for him for a while. But, frankly, when he did the tariffs on Chinese goods in the first administration, remember the Biden administration kept those tariffs in place. And I believe that there's really widespread bipartisan support for making sure that we do some manufacturing of certain things like chips and processors, that should be done in the United States. That's what the Biden administration's CHIPS Act was all about. But I think the whole premise that President Trump really took to heart the fact that the Chinese came out this morning and tacked on another 50%, driving their tariff rate up to 84%. Then he goes into 125%. I used to be a soccer player and a basketball player. In the ball field, we'd probably break up this fight before it got nasty.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's talk about this round of tariff whiplash. What does this mean for American businesses looking for their next move? What does this mean for them?
I think they can't do anything. What could you possibly do under this scenario? Pretend that we own a company together, and everyone watching, we all own this company together. You tell me what we should do. When policies change within days without having any forethought as to what could happen next, that leaves a decision maker, a business, with the very unlikely choice that, like, you might be doing the right thing, but you might not. And without that kind of clarity, I don't think you can proceed. It's like you're talking about a company would, start to build a warehouse or a facility in the United States. Would you? Should you? Should you do it in Vietnam now? Should you do it in South Korea? Who knows?
All right, Jill Schlesinger. Jill, thank you so much. Now, CBS News contributor J.D. Durkin joins us now live from the New York Stock Exchange. So, J.D., how are investors reading this move from the president? Is Trump kind of backpedaling? Is this a strategic plan? What's your read?
Well, my first read is that these are the sorts of days that make me very grateful to have lots of caffeine here on the trading floor of the New York Stock Exchange. There is just so much whiplash going on with major equities right now. If I were to ask 10 different people, what do you think the president's endgame is? What do you think he's thinking while he negotiates and puts out these posts on Truth Social? I'd probably get at least 20 different answers. The truth is, no one exactly knows really what is behind the calculus, but I can't stress enough. I think Jill Schlesinger's point there was really well taken. You're talking about real trust destruction out of the White House in the eyes of Wall Street. And here in New York, this is the financial capital of the world, but the momentum has been consolidated in the hands of not just Washington, but in particular, one man, just the president of the United States. And I think that uncertainty over tariff policy impossible for businesses as we get closer into earnings season to issue their forward-looking guidance. That all complicates and muddies the situation that much more. But the relief rally we saw today, to Jill's point, this tells us just how desperate investors in the market were for any little bit of good news. And they finally got at least a little bit of that at 1:18 p.m. earlier today with the president's post on social media.
Yeah, a lot of green on that heat map today. So does today's leap into the green, is it enough to erase the losses that we saw over the last several days? I think I know the answer. I'm hoping it's a different answer, but tell us your answer.
Not entirely. Listen, it's certainly a step in the right direction if you want to see these markets go positive. But today itself was an 8% intraday swing. I did the math before we came live. We're still down about 12% from the February 19th highs. And we can't forget February 19th, not that long ago. That was the all-time high for the stock market. This was a fundamentally different conversation just 5 or 6 weeks ago, but we're still down about 11 or 12% from that high water mark, still down about 10% from January 20th inauguration day, still down about 5% from the election. So it's certainly a step in the right direction. We want to see some clarity. We want to see more relief rallies, but one day does not a relief rally make. That's really going to underscore the importance of the upcoming trading sessions, but even those may get thrown sideways. We've got crucial inflation prints tomorrow. We're going to hear from Fed speakers. So there's always a lot of things that are moving the markets in different directions, but it's going to be really fascinating to see what happens in tomorrow's session.
Yeah, no doubt. Okay, JD, what are investors saying about the increased tariffs on China? Can we expect the stare down to continue to weigh in on Wall Street?
I don't see any other off-ramp right now except for that stare down to continue. We had evidence of China devaluing their own currency earlier this week, which is a sort of monetary policy kind of fight tit for tat and kind of additional shots across the bow. What's really interesting, if you look back at the president's post on Truth Social today, it reads like a small paragraph. And the first half of that little paragraph was all about how he is increasing the tariff rate on China. I think that actually led to a very brief further sell-off in the market that first minute. It wasn't until you get down and you read several sentences through that we got that little bit of relief that we really want. But for all of these companies that are so important to the S&P 500, companies like Apple and Tesla and NVIDIA and Broadcom, they have extraordinary revenue exposure to China. And as we get closer into earnings season, which really kicks off this Friday morning with the big banks, it's going to be really difficult for those companies and all of the trillions of dollars that they are collectively worth to give us a roadmap or any sense of confidence about what the road looks like moving forward. Because, hey, even the good news the president gave the markets today, it's a 90-day break. These aren't permanently new announced tariff policies. And we certainly know things can change by the minute with the Trump White House.
Good information. CBS News contributor J.D. Durkin, thank you so much. So lawmakers on Capitol Hill are also reacting to the rapidly changing tariff rules. During a House Ways and Means Committee hearing on trade, Nevada Congressman Stephen Horsford grilled U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer. Let's take a listen.
What are the details? How long is the pause? How many days? How many weeks?
I understand it's 90 days. I haven't spoken to the president since I've been
So the
in this
trade
hearing.
representative hasn't spoken to the president of the United States about a global reordering of trade.
Yes, I have. I've
And
just
yet
been in the hearing with you, sir.
But yet he announced it on a tweet. WTF? Who's in charge?
The president of the United States is in charge.
And what do you know about those details?
Well, as I mentioned,
It looks like your boss just pulled the rug out from under you and paused the tariffs, the taxes on the American people. There's no strategy. You just found out 3 seconds ago, sitting here, we saw you.
So CBS News congressional correspondent Nicole Killian is live. So Nicole, did the trade representative actually find out about the tariff pause during that hearing that we just heard in that exchange?
Well, look, we tried to press the trade representative on that soon after that exchange and after that hearing ended. He did not respond to any of our questions. An aide that was walking with him said that the trade representative's testimony spoke for itself. But we did ask very pointed questions. Did he know about this pause before he walked into that hearing today? That is certainly a question that some lawmakers had, even if this was something that was potentially under discussion, why he didn't raise that at some point in his testimony. But I would also point out that he did speak to me just yesterday when I asked him pretty pointedly, too, why there weren't any exemptions to this tariff policy, because that was also a key point that many lawmakers had in the Senate hearing yesterday. You know, they wanted to know why this wasn't more strategic, more targeted versus this blanket tariff approach. And what he told me at the time is that the president didn't want any exemptions, that he didn't believe that a Swiss cheese approach was right to trying to fix what, in the Trump administration's view, is a universal problem. But here we have, with this pause, some exceptions in the sense that, you know, everyone is exempt for now, more or less, with the exception of China. So obviously this is a period to allow these countries some negotiating room to talk with the United States, to talk with the trade representative, the president, the Treasury Secretary, to see if they can work out a better arrangement in doing this pause in the interim. But it certainly does raise a lot of questions on the part of many lawmakers here on Capitol Hill as to why the trade representative didn't appear to be better briefed on this pause as it occurred.
Yeah, and Nicole, also, some lawmakers have actually been trying to rein in the president on his ability to impose new tariffs. Where does that stand?
Yeah, well, obviously we'll have to see whether or not that continues to gain steam. You know, there were a number of Republican senators, for instance, here in the Senate that signed on to a bipartisan bill that would try to reinstate congressional authority over trade policy and require the president to notify Congress in advance of any new tariffs and kind of give Congress a little bit more say-so into whether or not a tariff could be enacted or pulled back. Now, one of the sponsors of that bill, Senator Grassley, said that's something that wouldn't be retroactive. But either way, the president had issued a veto threat against that bill. There have been other resolutions, too, aimed at potentially trying to nullify the national emergency powers that the president has to justify these types of tariffs. That's been more in a resolution type form. Again, we saw a bipartisan vote on that in the Senate. There's a similar measure over in the House, but so far it has not advanced. So again, we'll have to see if whether this pause, forces lawmakers to try to move ahead with legislation, or if they kind of take a wait-and-see approach, don't feel it's as necessary now, given this pause that's currently underway.
All right, CBS News Congressional correspondent Nicole Killian. Nicole, thank you. President Trump speaking just about an hour ago about his decision to pause reciprocal tariffs on most foreign goods while adding tariffs to Chinese goods. So he spoke about his desire for China to make a deal with the United States. So let's take a listen.
And President Xi's a proud man. I know him very well, and they don't know quite how to go about it, but they'll figure it out. They're in the process of figuring it out, but they want to make a deal. And we have many other countries, as you know, many more than 75, and they all want to come, and they want to come here, or they'll go to Commerce, or they'll go to Treasury. We have our great senators here and congressmen.
We go now to CBS News White House reporter Aaron Navarro. He's live outside the White House. What a day today, a lot to digest. What is the strategy here with added tariffs to Chinese goods?
Yeah, this follows after days where the U.S. and China have been going tit for tat, band for band when it comes to these retaliatory tariffs. This morning, we saw China institute essentially an 84% tariff on U.S. goods. In response, the U.S. has ratcheted our own tariff on Chinese goods to 125%. In a sense, a bet, because the U.S. Exports less to China than China exports to the U.S. That would get taxed, according to Trump, by 125%. And in general, it's about putting pressure on China through talks with its neighboring countries in Asia. We heard Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent talk about, quote, bad actors on this point. Take a listen to what he had to say.
It's about bad actors, and what we will see is some of the very early countries are China's neighbors. That we're going to see. I'm seeing Vietnam today. Japan's at the front of the queue. South Korea, India. So we will see. And as I've repeatedly said, and President Trump has been saying it for years, China is the most imbalanced economy in the history of the modern world, and they are the biggest source of the U.S. trade problems. And indeed, they are problems for the rest of the world, because what we've seen is that as the U.S. announced a tariff wall last week, many of those goods have already started flooding into Europe.
Now, aside from China, President Trump announced that there would still be a 10% reciprocal tariff on up to 75 countries, so less than what he had announced last Wednesday. The thinking there is it would give countries more breathing room, time to negotiate with the U.S. in terms of trade deals, and the White House says up to 75 countries have already come to that negotiation table.
Yeah, where do we stand with other countries when it comes to negotiations?
Well, we know that Canada and Mexico are exempt from this 10% reciprocal tariff, in part because they have their own specialized tariffs on auto parts, steel, and aluminum. The European Union, who President Trump has really sided and had gripes with in regards to the trade deficit, is part of this 10% baseline tariff. President Trump seemed open to negotiating. But in terms of conditions, the White House has laid out a couple of them. They want more investment in the U.S. when it comes to potential energy projects. We heard from White House officials an energy project when it comes to natural gas in Alaska that they hope that countries in Asia such as Japan and South Korea invest in. They want more companies abroad to bring their manufacturing plants into the U.S., which of course could take time. And they want, in general, the trade deficit to be lowered between the U.S. and these other countries. They want these countries to take in more United States exports. This 90-day period could give President Trump, his economic team, more time to work out the details with other countries.
Yeah, Aaron, this is a tough question to answer here, but I'm just going to ask it anyway. Any idea how China will respond to the new tariffs?
In part because President Trump announced his new 125% tariff around 1:08 a.m. local in Beijing. We have not yet seen any response, but just this morning on the East Coast, we really saw language from the Chinese foreign minister that they are not backing down on this, that they're willing to go forward with this trade war. On the White House's part, President Trump's part, they say that China just has to make the first move, essentially, kind of daring them to make the first call. We'll see if that ends up happening.
All right, Aaron Navarro, appreciate it. Thank you, Aaron. So reaction from across the country on President Trump's tariffs pause. We'll have more on that next, and you're watching CBS News 24/7. We're taking you around the country where people are reacting to President Trump's tariffs. We begin in Tennessee, and that is where we find CBS News correspondent Nicole Valdez. She joins us live from Nashville right now. So thanks for joining us, Nicole. What are you hearing from community members there?
You know, a very mixed bag of reactions. Doing just a lap around downtown Nashville, you'll hear a lot of people with a lot of different opinions. Some who are very supportive of the president's plan to continue to impose and stay strong on tariffs. Others who really don't agree with it. When it really came down to asking some questions, right? What are their concerns? Are they impacted? Some people simply told me, I just don't know enough about it at this point to know whether I'm going to be impacted and how much I'll be impacted, and really am not making any changes to my day-to-day life until I get more information. There were some, however, who were very outspoken about this topic, who had a lot to say. Some who work in the financial business, who really went into the weeds there, right, of where they think this will go and what the long-term impacts will be. When we focus in on a state like Tennessee and a city like Nashville, there are a lot of concerns in ways of the impacts. Of course, tourism is top of mind here, as well as prices of not only everyday items like grocery items, clothing, you name it, but there is a lot of people who come to Nashville to visit the bars and go out. And again, this is a destination for that. So, of course, prices for drinks, including liquor, alcohol, beer, and coffee, are all things that people here typically travel to really enjoy. So that is a part of the conversation, is how much more will the drink at the bar on Broadway cost me next time I visit Nashville? That is definitely something that some told me about. Now, again, I mentioned very really specific opinions here. We talked to one man who, again, supports President Trump's tariff plan. How do you feel about President Trump's tariff plan?
Well, I mean, I think they're aggressive, but they're needed. I think that as a nation, for many decades now, we've been dependent on other countries to supply us with basic goods and services. That needs to stop. We got to bring manufacturing home. We got to start manufacturing our goods and services here in the United States and employing Americans and building our economy infrastructure inside the walls of our border.
Now, on the other side of this, there are those who worry about how this will impact not only their wallets, their families, but their retirement funds. One woman specifically worried about that.
What it is impacting is I'm about 8 years from retirement and my financial planning is all screwed up because I just took a huge dip in my financial position and you don't have the time to recoup.
Now, to give you some numbers here, I want to point out some information from the International Trade Administration. Tennessee imported, one of the top import partners, I should say, for the state of Tennessee is, in fact, China, with more than $20 billion in goods imported in a single year. That was back in 2023. And exporting, China is actually the third largest export market for the state. And according to the U.S.-China Business Council, it actually supports nearly 20,000 jobs. So, of course, you can imagine that those who work in those industries are definitely asking those questions as to how this will impact them in the long run.
Absolutely. Nicole Valdez. Nicole, thank you. We now want to head to Texas, where CBS News national reporter Karen Wallace spoke to residents in Houston.
Hey, good to be with you. Here in Houston, you'll find this interesting mix of people who support President Trump's policies and people who don't. Texas is, of course, this big red state, but big cities like Houston often lean more liberal. So I want to introduce you to two gentlemen I met yesterday. They were shopping at this plaza below. One of them is Ray Lynch. He's an older local businessman. He owns a company here in Houston, and he says he voted for President Trump. And while he says he's seen this big hit to his 401k in the past few days, he has full faith that President Trump will right the ship. He believes these tariffs are just Trump's negotiating tactics. The second gentleman you'll hear from is a lot more scared.
I have a wait-and-see attitude. Obviously, it's strongly impacting my 401k. I've looked at it the last couple of days and it looks disastrous.
It does feel like it's going to short-term drive a lot of the prices up, and we're going to go back to those like really expensive grocery store items. Cars are probably going to go up in price, and that's something that the day-to-day American really needs. And it's really people like me who like live in like a middle-class family. We're really going to see the effects of it.
So that second gentleman is Miguel Alvarez, and he's a Gen Zer, a young adult who's still figuring out how to best manage his money. People like him are not going to have as much saved in the bank like Ray or like Miguel's parents, so there's going to be a lot less wiggle room if tariffs cause the prices of everyday items to go up. He's not going to have as much in the bank for those price changes. So his biggest question for financial experts is, what's the best thing to do with our money right now? It seems like it's not putting it into 401ks, since that's tied to the stock market volatility. So what is the alternate move? I'm sure our panel of experts coming up at 6 o'clock tonight may have some answers for him. Back to you.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's now go to CBS News national reporter Katie Weiss live in New Orleans. So, Katie, what are you hearing from people in your community?
Jules, good afternoon. I've been hearing also a mixed bag from folks, some people very optimistic, others quite pessimistic about what may happen as a result of this new tariffs plan. Some people are just really concerned about the trickle-down effects on lower-income families and the middle class here in the Big Easy. They're also worried about how it might drive up the price for things that just make our life easier, like smartphones that we use every single day. We've grown so dependent on them. To say that a smartphone could cost twice as much is scary to some people. Another thing, here in the Big Easy, New Orleans is still bouncing back after Hurricane Katrina. So people are worried about the cost of construction materials going up and the ability to build houses at an affordable cost. But others, though, feel that this is actually going to be a great thing for this city, that it's going to help create more American jobs and help boost the economy here in this area. Like I said, others, though, are feeling just a bit of uncertainty and wondering, is this something that we should really wait out and see? Is gambling with our money something that I can hold on to right now? Some people feeling like, okay, do I need to be talking to a financial advisor? What should I be doing with my money? Should I be taking it out of the bank or putting it somewhere else? Those are all big questions that we're looking folks here in New Orleans are looking to have answered very soon. And we'll, of course, be bringing you more tonight on CBS 24/7. Jules?
Absolutely. Katie, thanks so much. Yeah, so if you do have a lot more questions about the president's tariffs, and we've got answers, scan this QR code on your screen. It will take you to the CBS News Instagram page to add your questions in the comments section. Money Watch experts Jill Schlesinger and Kelly O'Grady will join the Daily Report tonight to answer those questions, and that special airs at 6 p.m. Eastern right here on CBS News 24/7. Coming up, tariffs still going up on China, and that could mean more expensive tech. So we're going to break down which devices could cost you more soon, and is now the time to buy. Stay with us. You're watching CBS News 24/7. As Trump's tariffs on China test supply chains for America's tech giants, consumers wonder what it means for the prices of everything from the phone in their hand to the electric car in the driveway. CNET Consumer Insights editor Deja Milden joins us now to help us out. Oh boy, we're going to ask you all those questions. When is it time to buy? Should we buy now? Should we wait? What is the advice?
Right now, what we're seeing is that there is really much so of a wait and see approach when it comes to how tariffs can impact electronics. And what that really means is there could be a chance that we see higher prices going into this year as we start thinking about some of those newer models. When we think about the tech that's already on the shelves for this year, already ready to buy, there's really not too much of a concern there right now. But if you are looking to get a smartphone, a laptop, any sort of home tech, even thinking about cameras, you're gonna want to start shopping around and seeing where you can find the best deal, because those are the devices that unfortunately we could see prices go up on those.
All right, so if prices go up, will tech giants actually be able to absorb the increased costs, or will it come down to the consumer? Will we have to bear the burden?
Usually when tariffs go into effect, the importer pays the price initially, and then that price is trickled down to the consumer. So more often than not, we see those higher prices when we get ready to pay for those smartphones or even those iPads, when we start thinking about tariffs and how they can impact those prices.
Is your phone blowing up with questions because people know that you work for the tech industry? What sort of questions are you getting right now?
Really, right now, is it the best time to buy? What should we really be buying right now instead of waiting on? And the answer really comes to think about, what are you buying and where do most of those products or even some of those items come from when you start thinking about the parts that it takes to build that tech, right? So when we start thinking about Apple devices, for example, some of those parts do come from China, and we think about a lot of the news that we're hearing today and even the retaliatory tariffs, that can mean that prices go up when we start thinking about the newer iPhone models or even the newer iPads that could come later this year or even next. Now, when it comes to, of course, those items that are already on the shelf, you might be okay, but if you're looking at getting tech, refurbished options could be really good. At the same token, really shopping around could save you some money just in case those tariffs do impact your price.
All right, Daisha, thank you so much. Good advice.
Thank you.
A major step when it comes to the legal fight over deportations. We'll explain next. You're watching CBS News 24/7. A federal judge in Texas is blocking the government from deporting Venezuelan men under the Alien Enemies Act. He cited the Supreme Court's decision that required due process before deportation, and the Maryland father mistakenly deported to El Salvador due to an administrative error. A New York judge blocked the order for similar reasons. Katrina Kaufman has been following this case for us. So, Katrina, thanks for joining us. What are some of your takeaways from that hearing in New York?
Juliet, it's great to be with you. The biggest takeaway is that the judge in New York has said that no Venezuelan migrants who are in the Southern District of New York can be deported using the Alien Enemies Act without a notice and hearing. And those were points that he was really concerned with during this hearing, Juliet. Under the Supreme Court's ruling from earlier this week, he said that it's necessary for this due process to be implemented for these migrants before they're taken from this country. So there has to be notice and an opportunity for them to be heard. What the ACLU was arguing during the hearing, they're the ones who are representing the plaintiffs here, was that there should be 30 days notice, and they say that they get that from World War II, which was the last time that the Alien Enemies Act was used. They're also asking that the notice be given in both English and Spanish, because they pointed out that a lot of these individuals don't even speak English, so they might be notified and really not understand what's happening to them. The other thing that the ACLU is trying to do is to certify a class so that these individuals don't all have to petition the court on their own. So the judge didn't make a determination about that yet, but they're trying to have this apply to all migrants in the Southern District of New York. Something that the judge said today is that he feels that these people need to be protected. So we're still waiting for a final order from him, and in the meantime, this temporary restraining order will be in place until April 22nd, when he plans to hold another hearing.
Katrina Kaufman. Katrina, thank you. An investigation by 60 Minutes correspondent Cecilia Vega found that there were no criminal records available for 75% of the 238 men deported to that El Salvador mega prison. Their family members are also maintaining their innocence. CBS News correspondent Lilia Luciano spoke to many of those family members. So, Lilia, what are those family members saying to you?
Julia, today, and especially after the Supreme Court ruling, those family members and their attorneys, the people who are advocating for these men who are already inside the Secot maximum security prison, a prison that was designed to contain terrorists, have lost a great deal of hope, because everything that seems to be discussed in the courts, whether in Texas, on the Supreme Court, or here in New York, seems to be focusing on people who have not been deported yet. But there has been very little mention on those cases, and we have seen on multiple of those hearings where there's a big question about jurisdiction. Who has the jurisdiction? Can these rulings apply to people who are not within those states or those courts or those districts' jurisdictions? I have been in touch with the government of El Salvador, and they keep sending me back to the Department of Homeland Security. I asked the border czar, Tom Homan, could you have made a mistake? Is there any kind of recourse to get these people back? And they're just saying, we trust the investigations. Those investigations sometimes based on something as simple as somebody having a tattoo of a crown or a clock or a rose or a star.
Yeah, that was my next question, because ICE is claiming many of the tattoos those men have are related to gang affiliation, but some experts are actually disputing that. So what are the details that you have?
Well, Juliet, I have spoken with experts in Venezuela who have been documenting Tren de Aragua since it began in Venezuela, in Aragua, in prisons. I have talked to experts in Aurora, Colorado, which the president has called a war zone, and the government has considered ground zero for TDA activity in the United States. I have talked to the person who spearheads the investigations into TDA in countries like Colombia. All of those people have told me, all of those law enforcement investigators have told me there is no such thing as tattoos that for sure tell you that somebody is or not a TDA member. I interviewed a member of the MS-13 inside that prison in El Salvador, inside Secot, who told me you can only get these tattoos that say MS-13 if you've killed people. That is how the government of El Salvador has used tattoos to imprison people. It's not due process, certainly. There's a lot of people who are in prison in El Salvador indefinitely without due process, but at least they're saying, according to the gang's culture, you can't get a tattoo if you haven't committed a crime. And in many cases, they're saying killings. I talked to the Minister of Security and Justice in El Salvador, and he showed me the tattoos that belong to MS-13. I have not seen anything from the people who have legitimately and over time studied TDA, other than the Texas Department of Public Safety and the Texas governor, who say, based on very questionable claims, that TDA can be targeted for sure because of tattoos.
All right, Lilia Luciano, thank you so much. At this hour, the president taking questions on his tariff strategy from the Oval Office just moments ago. So let's take a listen.
Bring them to the table. Why did you instruct or advise, or maybe they did it on their own, some of your top aides to say this is not a negotiation, to hold the line, that they were going to hold the line, that you were not going to change your mind?
A lot of times it's not a negotiation until it is, and that happens. And, I said outside that you have to have flexibility to do it right, and that's what we have. We brought everybody to the table, And it may not be a negotiation. It may not last. I mean, you know, things may be asked that I think are not fair to us. Look, we've been ripped off by essentially everybody for 35 years. This is not just a new thing. And Roger Penske just left. He's a great gentleman, great man, actually. And he said no other president would have had the guts to do this. And I believe that's right. They wouldn't have done it. They should have done this a long time ago. A long time ago they should have done it. I started it with China. I took in hundreds of billions of dollars in tariffs and taxes from China in my first term. And we had the greatest economy. We were up 88% on the stock market. That was the greatest ever in the history of our country. But it had to be done. It's something that had to be done.
Mr. President, thank you so much. Which countries will be negotiating first? Do you have any criteria? Because, for example, Brazil and the UK, they do not have deficits with the US. They have a surplus. They do not have a surplus. They have deficits with the US. So what is the criteria? And also, would you consider talking or meeting with Xi Jinping?
No, sure I would. He's a friend of mine. I like him. President Xi, I like him. I respect him. But they haven't treated our country right. Sure, I'd meet with him. On the other countries, we have Japan is here, and South Korea is here, and others are here, and we're trying to see them. It's, from what I hear, it's much more than 75. I said 75 plus.
So many.
It's everybody wants to make a deal, actually, and you know we want to do what's right for our country. We also want to do what's right for the world. The world is important. I mean, you know, it's the world, right? And I think we're going to make a lot of people very happy. And I think investing in the United States of America will be the greatest investment that anybody's ever made.
Mr. President, can we still expect to see the sectoral tariffs, so the pharmaceuticals, steel? Is that something you're still considering moving forward
Yeah,
with?
well, I will be, because we want them coming back. You know, we realized during COVID that we don't make our drugs and our pharmaceuticals in this country. So I realized that. And it was a big realization. We had to go to China to get drugs. We had to go to other places. I won't even mention the names, but we had to go to other places. We don't make it, and that's because we let them leave. And now if they want to come back, we're going to put tariffs on the pharmaceutical companies, and they're going to all want to come back. They're going to come back. I'm not going to pay them any money like Biden with the chip deal. That chip deal was horrible. They give billions and billions of dollars to chip companies. All they have is money. They have so much money. And they give billions of dollars, and they're just going to keep the money. They're not going to spend it. The only thing that's going to bring them back is you say, we have a barrier. You have to pay 50% or 100% or 200%. And if they have to pay that, they're going to say, we're not going to pay that. We're going to build here. And that's what happened. We're the biggest, most prestigious chip company in the world, spending $200 to $300 billion. Think of that, $1 billion to build essentially one massive plant. It'll be one of the largest plants in the world, and we're going to get them very quickly. We're going to get them energy. We're going to get them the electricity they need and the energy that they need, and it'll be approved by Lee Zeldin, a total professional, and it'll be approved very quickly. And they'll get their zoning very quickly. They'll have everything done in a matter of months.
Thank you, sir. You've procured a record amount of private sector investments since your election, $7 trillion. You talked about the importance of all that. Can you talk about how these investments will have a positive impact on families who felt like the previous economy left them behind, and why your executive orders on coal yesterday is so important given the amount of manufacturing that you're ushering back in?
Good, thank you. And which is correct. We have, I would say, more than $7 trillion now, right, of investment coming in. Apple is coming in for $500 billion alone. We have other companies coming in with massive numbers. We have car companies that are coming in. No, we've never seen anything like it. Maybe in the 1940s or 50s or something, but we've never seen anything like it. They had 3 plants canceled in Mexico. Not that we want to hurt Mexico, but we're for us. And that's what my job is. It's not to take care of other countries, but I want to help other countries as much as I can, but we have to take care of America first, and it's about America first. So we have many, many companies coming in that would have never come in if we didn't win the election and then put the tariffs on. And they're coming in because when they build in the United States, there are no tariffs. You don't have to pay any tariffs. So instead of paying 30, 40, 50% or 25%, but It could go a lot higher in some of the industries. So we have steel mills right now that are raging. The steel industry was gone. If I didn't put the tariffs on steel, because China was dumping massive amounts of steel in my first term, and I put tariffs on it, I saved the steel industry, but now it's going to thrive, maybe like never before. I mean, if you go back to U.S. Steel from 90 years ago, it was incredible. It was the #1 company in the world for a long time. That's why we don't want to see it go to Japan. And we love Japan, but U.S. Steel was a very special company. We don't want it to go to Japan or any other place. So we're working with them, and I don't know if they need any money now. I'll be honest with you, they hit gold. They hit gold because if you look at it, they have such orders for steel now. It's incredible. What's going on in our country is incredible with respect to plants. So we lost 90,000 plants and factories from the beginning of NAFTA, the worst trade deal ever made in the history of this world, but certainly in the history of trade. There's never been a worse.
You've been listening to the president answering questions about his tariff strategy from the Oval Office. We'll have more on that in America Decides with Major Garrett. That's next, with more on President Trump's 90-day pause on most of his new tariffs. And then be sure to tune in tonight. Money Watch experts Jill Schlesinger and Kelly O'Grady will join the Daily Report to answer questions about tariffs. That special airs at 6 p.m. Eastern right here on CBS News 24/7.